Good evening, I'm Mark Dolan, and this is Headliners, your first look at tomorrow's papers, understandably under the circumstances, a more sombre episode. Joining me to look at what are widespread tributes to the late, great Queen Elizabeth II, I'm delighted to welcome the comedians Josh Howie and Nick Dixon. Lots to get through. Of course, we'll be looking at what has been a very challenging day for King Charles III. But, gentlemen, it's your first time on air since the very sad news of the Queen's death broke. Josh Howie, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's been a pretty crazy few days. I almost feel like the grief has been a bit like her in terms of the stoicism that her character had, and that's been translated to, I think, people getting on with life, but, you know, also reflecting in their quiet moments, maybe.
Definitely. You and I are of a similar vintage, although you look a lot older.
Thank you.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because I was born in 74. What year were you born?
76.
76. So, you know, you'll remember 1977. And the Queen, we were born into her legacy, weren't we? Into her reign.
It's just that day-to-day part of your life, whether it's post-it, whether it's stamps or money or just everything, you know, the news. You know, she's a constant. She has been part there every day, repeatedly. So that it's just a shift to get into a new way of thinking.
It's amazing to think that, you know, in the mid-70s, she was already a fixture in our lives, having actually come to the throne in the 50s. I mean, it's just quite remarkable. What are your thoughts a few days on from the very sad news, Nick?
Yeah, well, Her Majesty the Queen was famous for not being one for public displays of emotion, which I think is appropriate, and the British way. So I don't want to get too emotional, but at the same time, I'm not a royal expert, so all I can really offer is my experience. And my experience was one of a feeling of immediate grief, a sort of visceral grief, which I was surprised at. And it was much like Boris Johnson said, we were surprised by the intensity of feeling. And that's how I felt. And I immediately recalled being a very young child at school, and a whole school leaving the school to line up along the pavement because we heard the Queen was going to drive by, and we all had our little Union Jack flags. This was a big moment. This was in Ambleside back in the 80s. And just a glimpse of the Queen was a big deal. And people don't necessarily, from other countries, might not realise this. But it was a huge deal. And the Queen's been there not just for my entire lifetime, but almost my parents' entire lifetime. Yeah. She made that pledge in 1947, whether my life be long or short, you know, I'll do my duty, and so on. And then, of course, a few years later, she was Queen. So it's extraordinary. She's been there our entire lives. It's
a double whammy, Josh, isn't it, of her contribution and her longevity.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I've been grieving a bit more than Nick, I think, about it. But you know,
Are you in competition?
Well, I'd say I saw her as well. I saw her once. You know.
Really?
Yeah.
When was that?
It was at the horse races.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Care to offer any more detail on that anecdote?
Just I saw her, and I was like very excited. I was like, "There's the Queen!" It was like
she
real.
was impressed with you. I'm sure she
got back to school, boasted to my friends. Whatever, it was great.
I'm sure she looked at you and thought, "There's a talented young man with a big future."
No, she was like, "There's a very bald kid over there."
It's also just reflecting on the last few days. I think people haven't realised how much she meant to them. That obviously, when the news broke, you can universally be very sad at the death of a woman who was the sovereign of this nation, a mother, a grandmother, etc. But I think people that didn't previously think of themselves as particularly pro-monarchy are now in mourning.
Absolutely. And I think it's interesting how the depth of impact that because it's literally just part of our reality. So I think but you know what grief is like. It affects you differently at different times, different people. There's different ways it's expressed. So I think for a lot of people, it's always, for me, it's always in those quiet moments. It's doing the dishes or whatever. It's having a sudden thought.
Well, that's right. I'll be in the hot seat for Headliners tonight and tomorrow night. Andrew Doyle is looking after the show on Wednesday and Thursday. It's going to be a different kind of show, tonally different, because of this very sad news that we're still processing. But we're very happy to be on air. And, of course, we don't choose the stories on Headliners. It's all about tomorrow's front pages. So let's have a look at what Fleet Street are running with. We'll start with the Daily Mail, who go with the following. A very reflective image of Prince Charles. Silent vigil for a queen and a mother. Solemn duty, head bowed, King Charles III stands in silence as he guards his mother's coffin in the vigil of the princes at St Giles's Cathedral in Edinburgh earlier tonight. OK, let's have a look now at the Telegraph. Guard of Honour is the headline. The Queen, like so many generations of our family before her, found in the hills of this land and in the hearts of its people a haven and a home. OK, The Independent next. Royal siblings united in grief. Princes Edward, Andrew, Anne, and of course, King Charles III. We're going to have to get used to calling him the King. Meanwhile, and we'll be covering this story later in the show, Ukraine's counterattack reaches the Russian border. Zelensky's troops reclaim dozens of towns in the northeast. Some rare good news this week. Moving on now, let's see where we'll go next. It's The Guardian, and PM under pressure to reveal details of energy crisis plan. And the message hidden within Poet's farewell to the Queen. Also, civil liberties groups alarm over anti-monarchist arrests. Financial Times now. And once again, more images of the Queen on the front page of the FT. Also, Kwarteng tells Treasury to adopt new focus entirely on growth. Daily Express next. Lost in grief for darling Mama. Metro, the King's Vigil. And last but not least, the Daily Star. A nation mourns. 30-hour queue to pay respects. Fears of huge wait to see Queen's coffin. King Charles III leads family in sad procession. Harry's tribute to his granny's service and smile. Mourners have been told they could have a 30-hour wait to pay their respects to the Queen as she lies in state at the Palace of Westminster, and she'll be heading in that direction tomorrow. And those are your front pages. And we'll start with the front page of The Independent and this evening's vigil in Edinburgh, Josh.
Yeah, so the headline is Royal Siblings United in Grief. I'm not going to be the first person to point this out, but of course, as well as being our Queen, she was their mum. And the four of them are together. And supposedly it's the first time that Prince Charles has seen the coffin. And also he was moved to tears after his talking to the Scottish Parliament this morning. And for anybody who's lost people in their lives, I just can only speak from experience, but it's when you see the coffin that it becomes real.
Yeah.
And that's seeing their mum.
Very tough, and it's interesting how many Brits want to go to London and how many Scots today went out to pay their respects to the Queen. People want to have a tangible moment in which they say goodbye to our monarch.
Absolutely. And that's great. And we'll see, you know, we're going to talk about this in a bit, whether the kind of numbers people are expecting. But yeah, it was lovely to see people out paying respects. Of course, we did also see someone not paying their respects and someone screaming. And, you know, it's like you have your position about the monarchy, but come on, mate, like, well, that's not the time.
Indeed, I think it's just a question of tone, isn't it, and choosing your moments. You know, Nick Dixon, you're a free speech absolutist, but I guess there's a time and a place.
Yeah, that was strange. Someone on Twitter issued a challenge to GBNews people and said, oh, what would they say about this? Well, of course, most people at GBNews, probably everyone would say it's free speech. Obviously, yeah, it's tasteless. But then I thought maybe I should take a stronger stance just for balance and start and bring back strong treason laws. So maybe I'll take that stance. But yeah, it was tasteless, but I suppose it's free speech. It's one sign. That's my position.
Well, that's a good position to have. Let's have a look at Tuesday's Daily Mail and our new king and his siblings earlier today in Edinburgh, Nick. And it is about the family supporting our new monarch, isn't it?
Absolutely. They've gone with King Charles III and his siblings sit alongside their mother's coffin after sombre march through Edinburgh. Grief-stricken royals watch as the Queen's 500-year-old Scottish crown is placed on a flag-draped casket. And if you are interested, the crown was made in 1540 for King James V. From a crown made 37 years earlier, it has 42 gems and precious stones and almost 70 Scottish pearls. So if you're interested in the detail of it. But yeah, it's this meeting, of course, of the personal and the very public. And Charles, particularly, King Charles III now, is known to be even more emotional. The Queen, as we've said, not so emotional, or not publicly. Charles is known to be a bit more emotional, so it'll be interesting to see. I must say, he's handled it all very well so far. So yeah, I thought his speech was when he addressed the nation was very interesting. Yeah. That was a mixture of. It was quite interesting because he asserted his Christianity again, which I found very interesting, and his role as head of the Church of England. But he also made a reference to the multi-faith aspect of the country. I've actually got it here. He said, in the course of the last 70 years, we've seen our society become one of many cultures and many faiths. But he did say our values have remained and must remain constant. The roles and duties of monarchy also remain, as does the sovereign's particular relationship and responsibility towards the Church of England, the church in which my faith is so deeply rooted. So it is also a time to assert faith in God, which the Queen felt very strongly, and Prince Charles feels very strongly. Although it'll be interesting to see if William feels the same, because the Queen felt she was chosen by God, and Charles, from what I hear, feels the same. So it'll be interesting to see if that continues, because obviously now it's very complicated in multicultural Britain to assert the Christian faith in that way.
Doesn't he have to say it? I mean, that he's also adopted now. He's as the head of the church, so he can't sort of say, "Oh, church isn't that important to me."
He has to say it, but he also happens to believe it, and there are different levels you can express it to. For example, when he did the oath, in reference to the Scottish part of the oath, he made reference to the true Protestant religion, which many people wondered for years, would he actually say that? So he's actually stuck with tradition on that, even where it's somewhat controversial, i.e. the mention of Protestantism. But he's stuck to that, and I do believe he is a devout Christian. And of course, the Church of England, we can criticise it now, but yes, he is the head of the Church of England, but he does actually also believe it. And it was nice to see that reference to "May flights of angels sing thee to thy rest." Also a religious reference, but of course a reference to Shakespeare, which is good to get in as well.
I'm going to be a bit more cynical. I don't know whether he genuinely believes it or not. I think he's saying the right. What you've spoken to him, have you? He's saying the right stuff. He sounds the part. He looks the part. He has a sort of. There's definitely a physicality to him that sort of he seems to suit the role now. Somehow he's sort of grown into it. That extra time, he just does. There's something about his face. It sort of looks more regal somehow.
Do you think he's been practising in the mirror for a few years?
I tell you what, I guarantee you someone's been working with him on his elocution, because he doesn't sound like people, they used to do those impressions of Prince Charles. Yeah. He doesn't sound like that anymore.
Slightly more pompous
he just
voice.
Sounds just like a normal posh bloke.
Yeah. Do you think he'll be a monarch that tries to bring together all faiths?
I think, well, that's what he did say, and that's a great thing. And look, if religion is genuinely a big part of his life, that's a fantastic thing to hear. I think we need more people saying that. Religion's a big part of my life, Yeah. But I also am aware that he's saying all the right stuff. Let's see whether his actions...
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty hard to get elected to the position of President of the United States without devoting yourself to God as well. I mean, you can't... there'll never be a US president that doesn't say that they believe in God. Even Donald Trump had to play that game. But perhaps it might be more authentic.
Yeah, well, from everything I know about King Charles III, he does actually believe it. Yeah. From everything I know about him, yeah.
Very good. Let's move on now to our next story, and it's another one from the Mail, and the news of the national 1-minute silence for Her Majesty, Josh.
Yeah, so they're going to do this on the Sunday before her funeral at 8 p.m. in the evening. I don't know why they're doing it then. I don't know why they're not making it 2 minutes. I think, why not 2 minutes? Like, Liz Truss has said that this is like to reflect on her legacy and mourn on her life. And you think, well, a minute seems a bit stingy.
Is a 1-minute silence, is that not the unit of currency for a silence?
I always thought they were 2 minutes. I feel
football matches, it's 1 minute of silence.
Yeah, but because it's a football match, isn't it? Like, you're not going to... But 2 minutes seems like... you're not going to get much reflecting done in a minute. That's my thing. Also, it seems like they're trying to go for this whole NHS clap, not the clapping, obviously, but this idea that people maybe will stand outside their houses, like united in group. That's what they're sort of talking about. I think that's what they're trying to emulate. And that's not a bad thing, to be able to grieve together, to create a moment where we all stop and maybe that's why they're doing it on Sunday evening. I just don't know. Why do you think they're doing it Sunday evening?
I don't know about a Sunday evening.
Well, it's the eve of the funeral for a start.
Yeah.
Why not do it in the morning of the funeral or during the or whatever? I don't know.
Yeah, they've gone for 8 p.m. the night before. I do think a minute is the standard. On the 11th of November, it is a minute, isn't it? So I think a minute's the standard. It is interesting. I mean, these kind of debates. There was also the football. Should the football be cancelled? Because people were saying that's a chance to do a minute's silence. It's also a chance for the fans to sing the anthem. And that's some people, including my friend Toby Young, felt that was a missed opportunity. I actually...
Nice name drop, by the way.
Well, because he wrote an article in the colleague, let's say. He wrote an article in the paper.
No, you can't backtrack.
He just said you're your best friend. He literally just said you're best friends.
He wrote an article about it, so that's why I mentioned it.
Together.
Are you throwing him under the bus? And your colleague now.
Well, I slightly disagree. So, although I agree that if cricket is going to go ahead and rugby is going to go ahead, then football should definitely go ahead, because that's been part of the controversy. However, I do think some people have slightly missed the magnitude of it and saying, oh, I'm annoyed the football's cancelled. Of course, I wanted to watch Man United versus Crystal Palace as much as the next person.
Why would you want to watch Man United get beaten again?
Because him and Toby Young are going to hang out together and watch the football.
We've actually been winning recently. You need to keep up, Mark. But the question of whether the football should go ahead, I can understand people's point that it would have been a nice celebration, but I also wonder if some people, let's say some of the London Liberal people I know, if they really understand the magnitude...
Talking about you, mate. He's talking about me and you.
If they really understand the magnitude of this, and of course some things are going to be cancelled, and that is part of the mourning period.
Yeah, I mean, there was consternation about the football being cancelled. It's very clear, I think, having grown up with the Queen as our great monarch, that she would not want to fuss and that she would quite like business as usual, and that we should have had all of the events go ahead and actually have the public.
Well, I think it was the
affection.
inconsistency that upset people. And
yeah. I mean, cutting the police some slack, I think there was an issue about whether, for example, in London, there would be enough police numbers to look after football matches and those going down to Buckingham Palace.
Yeah, some people said, oh, is it a class issue? I'm not sure, because, football's meant to be working class. I'm not sure if it is. I think it's just football's much bigger. Their decisions resonate much more. They're probably afraid of making the wrong decision. And as you say, the numbers of police.
So a 1 minute silence on Sunday at 8. Have you ever been silent for more than a minute, Nick?
Well, it's my job. I keep getting criticised on this show for talking, but it is actually my job.
Do you struggle
to talk? No, I'll be fine because I'm on my own most of the time.
Do you think we could film it?
It's actually weird to talk.
Why don't you start out? Do a 40-minute silence. Get to the end.
I'm sure there'll be plenty.
I would like
mainly you and Mark throughout.
I think Nick Dixon should live stream his minute silence. I would like video evidence that it happened, John.
Well, I'd like to. I wonder if we are doing it with our neighbours and out on our front door, whether we if we're going to start outdoing each other. Like where people did with the clapping and stuff.
Yeah.
Or like 10 days silence.
Yeah, let's see who loved her more.
Sheila next door is sort of wailing.
Yeah, there's going to be some... keep it... But it's going to be a bit of a nightmare. If I'm going to be out with the kids and trying to keep the kids all quiet, it's like, it's going to be tough.
That's actually a good point. It'll be the first time I've seen my neighbours since we all cared about the NHS.
Yeah, too right. Tuesday's Telegraph now, and the rules for working members of the royal family, Nick.
Yeah, Prince Harry denied right to wear military uniform during mourning, but exception made for Prince Andrew. So it's a little bit complicated. So the Duke of Sussex, Harry, of course, has been denied the right to wear military uniform at the funeral, but there's an exception for Andrew, but he's not allowed to wear it for the mourning period. Andrew will be permitted to wear the uniform on one occasion, the final vigil in Westminster Hall, as a final mark of respect, but not beyond that, as far as I can tell. So, yes, it's a complicated relationship. Obviously, the difficulties of dealing with Andrew and Harry have presented some challenges. I mean, the royal family have had a lot of challenges back in the day with Wallace Simpson and so on. And we've also had the challenge of Meghan. I don't know if I saw a tweet that said, claimed that British people hate Meghan more than Andrew. And I don't know whether that's true or verifiable, but I do think people have underestimated the impact Meghan has had. There's this assumption that, people don't like it because they're racist or they've just taken against it. Of course, when she first arrived, people were desperate to welcome her. I think it's actually because of the impact she's had on the country. We already had Brexit. Our monarchy is obviously a huge deal to us. But it's only been, there's only been one interregnum, and that didn't go that well. And that was a long time ago. And
you're saying she's worse than Brexit?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, but you can't really. I wouldn't make a crass comparison whether she's worse than Andrew. I'm just saying people underestimate. Actually, we don't like to have our royal family messed with, and we never have historically. It hasn't gone well in really any occasion, although the royal family have weathered it, and it's interesting how well they've managed to weather it.
Well, yes, I mean, any hopes for a rehabilitation of Meghan Markle in the views of the British public are dashed, aren't they? Wouldn't you say, Josh?
No, well, let's see. This book,
been a great renaissance,
this book hasn't come out yet. I don't know, there was some stuff like she's hugging people, and that was nice when they sort of all went out together. I understand that was a gesture from Prince William, and he said, let's all go out together and let's... I feel like they're making an effort, the rest of the family, to kind of bring them back a bit into the fold. Let's see whether they then what's going to come out with this book, what other stuff that she says. But like you said, there seems to be very much it's coming from America. Like, it can be that two things are true at once. They're definitely, if you look at the coverage of Kate and you look at the coverage of her, there was definitely there was inconsistencies there that you're going, I wouldn't call them necessarily out-and-out racism, but you're going, wait a minute, she wears a dress and she's like all fine, but Meghan wears a dress and suddenly there's exactly the same dress and suddenly there's something wrong. There was something going on there in the press. Saying that, her behaviour, I believe, has not been acceptable, and there have been basically lots of fibs and things like that. And so, yeah, I don't think people don't like her because they're racist. That's wrong.
She certainly didn't have more scrutiny than Princess Diana, did she? So I question any racial angle. Also, it's interesting that you've put the nicest possible spin on that so-called walkabout, but apparently, it's only speculation, but apparently there was a camera organised and Meghan and Harry were going to do something, so William basically saved the day and said, well, no, come with us. You know, but at the last minute they agreed, but it wasn't, you know, to put a brave face in it. But anyway.
Well, there you go. I'm sure that one will rumble and rumble, a right royal soap opera. On to Tuesday's Times and predictions for just how many will be coming out to pay their respects to Her Majesty. Josh.
Well, this is it. So they're talking about a 5-mile queue because the best way, I think, to celebrate someone who embodied Britishness is to do something that embodies Britishness. And there's nothing more than that than queuing.
Correct.
So I feel like that is basically the best way for us to show our respect.
Ideally in the rain.
Yeah, forget all going and seeing the coffin. You know, let's just get in a queue. There's queues everywhere. That's what the country should do. That's how we show our respect, our Britishness. Because it's interesting, isn't it, this whole sort of the nation... And I think that's just the importance of the Queen. I think a lot of people are realising certainly what she gave and through her the monarchy, but that adds to our idea of being British.
Well, definitely. An interesting line from the highly respected historian Andrew Roberts in the Daily Telegraph, tomorrow's Daily Telegraph. We are seeing a Britain many feared was lost.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, you know, silver clouds and whatnot, but I think at those moments, in the moments of births, in the moments of death, that's when people take stock of their surroundings, their environment. And I think people have been affected deeply. And it, like I say, it's going to come out at different times over a long period of time. But part of that is realising that we are bonded somewhat. Yeah. This woman was in all of our lives, serving all of us so amazingly for such a long time. I think we're all connected by that.
But the question is, does that bond survive her passing?
Well, that is the big question, isn't it? Well, then it goes down to King Charles III.
Is it up to him? He's got the gig, right? And he can tap into that.
He can smash it home. Yeah. It's up to him to ruin it or not. I think it's been set up well as it can be. To sort of bring the comedy analogy into it. You're going out on stage, the lighting's there, everything's good, microphone's working.
You just followed Nick Dixon, who's torn the roof off.
Yeah, well, actually, I prefer it when he doesn't do that well, and then it's like their expectations are low. Anyway, but, it's for him to fail.
It's there for the taking.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what does he need to do? Does he just replicate his mother?
Well, yeah, absolutely. Why not?
Stay out of politics.
I mean, look, he's gone to great pains to sort of talk about how he understands that the role is different from what he was...
Does he mean it?
Well, that's going to be the question. And lots of people, the commentators, are saying that can a leopard change their spots? Or does it really matter? Or does the monarchy change with it? He's a human being, he has ideas, but the point is he becomes something greater than himself. He becomes a role. Yeah. And that's what he has to adopt. And we'll see if he can handle that or not.
Can he, Nick Dixon?
Well, that is the key question. It's interesting, the quote about a Britain we thought was lost, because had this been covered in, say, the 80s, 90s, even early 2000s, there would have been a unanimous patriotic voice in the media and so on. Now, because of the joys of Twitter and 2022, we get to see the other side of how much unfortunate hatred there also is out there, and it comes from the far left with the pronoun people. It comes from certain race-obsessive people, Trevor Sinclair's bizarre moment, and some Republicans who some are polite, some are not. And then the sort of...
Also comes from America. A
And
lot
from
of that is
America,
America.
yes.
And a lot of it's coming from Ireland.
Yes, a lot. That's true. And then there's a certain sort of people who so-called don't mind the Queen, people who I've spoken to in London, but they don't understand why the football's cancelled. So there's different degrees. But yes, it's good to see there is still that patriotic core of people, or people who just love the Queen. There's different motivations. But it's interesting how many people are going to be there, because they're talking about whether it will be more than the 1 million that came out for the funeral of Diana. So that will also be interesting to see. And as for your other question, yes, hopefully Charles can keep the monarchy on a sure footing. I think William is also the great hope, because he does seem very sensible. He does seem to have that sense of duty, and sometimes he goes a little bit woke. So as long as he can tone that side down, maybe he's the hope.
Well, will King Charles use William as Prince of Wales to be the campaigner, to pick up the baton?
Well, if he's clever, maybe yes. But I suspect he sees this as his moment. So I think the ego is going to come into it. He's still a human being.
To what extent does Charles need to make this his own? Because, I mean, you said, yes, he should follow the template of the Queen, which, by the way, she was faultless for decades.
Yeah.
But should he also put his own personality into it?
Well, times change and all of that, but whether he goes too far or not, I don't know. But it's interesting. There is definitely a theme here where they're sort of trying to compare it, or like there's some sort of competition with Diana. They're going, a lot of these articles, they go, Diana had 1 million, and this is going to be 3. Is she going to have as many as Diana and all of this? So it's an interesting thing that they seem to be sort of unconsciously or not throwing up within these articles. Yeah,
there is that. And just to answer your other question, I think he has to put his own personality into it. If you think of things like that brilliant film, The King's Speech, where we see George VI had to put his personality into it. He was worried about taking on the throne after his brother abdicated. But I think the key is to put your personality into it, and then the world sees that and connects with you, much as they did with the Queen.
And what would that be? How will a Charles monarchy differ from that of Elizabeth?
Well, I think Charles is known to be a bit more emotional. He's a bit more touchy-feely. If you actually watch clips of him over the years, he is quite fun. He will take on various challenges. There's clips of him rapping and dancing and so on.
So there'll be a bit of banter and some humour.
Yeah, some humour, some banter.
And some hugging.
The question,
sounds like an evening with Dick Dixon.
The question is, will he continue some of his more questionable political ideas, obviously ones about the global Marshall Plan for the climate and so on? Those are the ones we're hoping. And he did hint that he would now put those kinds of things aside, so that's what I'm hoping for.
Let's now go back to the Mail and some big preparations for the upcoming state funeral, Josh.
So some people are saying it's going to be 30 hours of queuing. They're saying that London could be full, which is kind of amazing to think of. I mean, London's a pretty big city, so the idea that we're going to get full. But also, they're sort of saying that what preparations people are going to need to go through in terms of, bring your water, bring some food. You're going to be moving the whole time if you are in these queues. You're not going to get to stop at the coffee. You're going to have to walk past it. So it sounds like it's a bit of a logistical nightmare in terms of there's going to be a lot of police. There needs to be lots of stewards. And they're saying, don't bring little kids, obviously. People queuing up overnight, have a small bag. There's a lot of practical elements to make this happen.
Well, they're talking about a ring of steel, aren't they, around the city?
Yeah, 10,000 police. And I didn't even know we still had 10,000 police. Yeah. So that's nice to hear. Yeah.
A few out of retirement, maybe.
Yeah, and sort of snipers and certainly when it comes to the funeral, and you're going to have all these world leaders. I'm getting visions of... what's the French movie? The Jackal. Day of the Jackal. Yeah, I'm getting that vibe going on here. And the SAS are going to be making an appearance as well. That's exciting. Well, I don't think we're going to know that they're there. But if you see a big buff bloke, it's not me.
Yeah.
But someone out
in
there.
Camouflage.
Yeah, it could be an SAS dude.
With a grenade.
Yeah.
What do you think about this? I mean, it's going to be such a colossal event on a scale that we've possibly never seen before.
Yeah, it's going to be massive. And the SAS are the best in the world, so if anyone can sort it, it's them. Though at the same time, it's quite disturbing that we need that level of security, but I suppose an event of this magnitude, of course we will. Yeah, not loads.
And it's different from when Diana... 1997 is a very different time now, so the security concerns are going to be much different.
Yeah, just on the numbers, by the way, there was one story that said it was going to be 750,000. Then by the next story we had, it'd gone up to 1 million, even between two stories. Yeah. So it's getting bigger.
By tomorrow, it's going to be 3 million.
Yeah, it could be.
Notwithstanding the cost of security, it is money, no object, isn't it, Nick, when it comes to recognising Elizabeth?
It sort of has to be, doesn't it? I mean, there is talk of this, and the bank holiday late we might cover it is going to, cost us $2 billion or something like that. But yeah, what can you do? It's a time of national mourning, so it's pretty much inevitable.
It is. Let's now go over to The Guardian, and we take a look at the family tributes to a late mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother. Nick.
Yes, I'm forever grateful Prince Harry pays tribute to the Queen. So the Duke of Sussex has paid tribute to the Queen's unwavering grace and dignity in a farewell message. He also thanked her for her sound advice and infectious smile. And he said, in celebrating the life of my grandmother, Her Majesty the Queen, and in mourning her loss, we were all reminded of the guiding compass she was to so many in her commitment to service and duty. She was globally admired and respected. Her unwavering grace and dignity remained true throughout her life and now her everlasting legacy. So it's a very good speech. You do wonder when he says duty, of course, you're reminded of the fact that perhaps Prince Harry hasn't been so good on the duty element, but he is, much like, King Charles, he is stepping up and it is a good speech. He is saying the right things. And, of course, we just hope that he sticks to that and doesn't change his mind when it comes to this book and so on.
Do his warm words about his grandmother not stick in the craw, given the stress that he caused her over the last couple of years?
Yeah, I know what you mean. Of course, he's bound to make a speech, and I'm sure it is heartfelt. I mean, and it is his grandmother, and I'm sure he means it, so I don't think we have to be too cynical. But at the same time, yes, one does hope he takes this moment to change course, rethink some of his strategy, and whether he can now, whether he's too far committed to, the King made reference to his life overseas. He said, I want to express my love for Harry and Meghan as they continue to build their life overseas. Some people saw it as some sort of mild attack, or some people, I think more likely it was just a nice gesture.
Well, yeah, for sure. Now, also in The Guardian, another story that reminds us we haven't just lost a monarch, Josh.
Yeah, so Princess Anne, they're saying, has had the hardest job because she's been escorting Queen's coffin, from Balmoral, which was, I think, like their happy place as a family, to Edinburgh, and then I believe she's also going to be escorting to London as well when it gets flown down tomorrow. So, yeah, and they were very close. Her only daughter. She's an interesting character, Princess Anne, because she sort of raised her own kids. She didn't give them titles. Yeah. So they've kind of managed to have quite normal lives. And I think that was maybe that's obviously what she wanted for her children. Again, we're going back to a family in grief, a nation in grief. And for us, it's removed and it's somewhat... it's different, isn't it? It's not... But of course, it's for them. It's going to... You just have to remember. And through all of that, they have to do all the ceremony and they've got thousands of millions of people watching them all the time.
That's right. I mean, Prince Charles, King Charles now III, he could do, couldn't he, with 6 weeks off just to gather himself and prepare for the role. But he will have no such window. But then
some people want to be busy in that time. Like I said, it isn't that.
Is it in the nation's interest for him to be given time to grieve?
I think he's very conscious of placing himself in that role.
And I suppose you have the element of momentum.
Yes.
You have the very smooth transition.
And that's what's been strange being at home the last week and watching this stuff and how instant it was, or how seamless it was. Just kind of like the Queen is dead and now he's king.
Yeah, he becomes king instantly.
It's a lot of change all happening at the same time.
And what about Anne? Because I think Anne is an unsung heroine of the royal family. Do you spy an enhanced role for her?
That's what they're saying.
King Charles.
I think there's only like 21 months between King Charles and her, whereas there's like 10 or 13 years between the other siblings. So, and I think she's sort of being quite clever, being there in the background, being supportive in a different way, and also, I believe 2021, she did more events than King Charles and whatever. Like, she is out there supporting charities, going to all these places. And again, like the Queen, just getting on with it.
And I just wonder whether she, Nick, could be our connection to the Queen, because she's so much like her mother. She's no-nonsense, practical, down-to-earth and hard-working.
Absolutely. One thing I was going to say about Anne is the great thing is I don't know much about her. And that's very much in keeping with, how the royals have behaved. Or certainly it's best if they behave like that, in my opinion. And although when I looked into her more, it was interesting. She had this kidnapping attempt in 1974. I don't know if you know much about it.
Yeah.
When someone with a gun actually came to her, tried to get her out of the car and said, "Get out of the car." She said, "Not bloody likely," which is just so perfect. That's exactly what you want from the royal family. And she's also a respected equestrian. She's got a gold medal at the European Eventing Championships. So, yes, she's a sort of dark horse figure, very hardworking and tough person. Sounds like and a very interesting person. So we're now probably going to see a bit more of her.
And here's hoping. Tuesday's Times has a story that opens the door on some of King Charles's homes, Josh.
Yes, so guess what? He's got a load of choice where he's going to live. So his favourite, I think, is supposedly Highgrove House, and I think he's got like these gardens. He's into all that stuff. But there was going to be a bit of a struggle. I think the courtiers or whoever, they're going to want him in Buckingham Palace. That's the symbol. That's the centre of it all. But I think there was word in the past that he would almost try and turn it into some sort of tourist site and just use it for the big conferences and the base of the royal family, but not actually live there. Supposedly it's not a particularly nice place to live, and supposedly the Queen didn't particularly like living there either. It's big, it's a bit run down. I know they're fixing it up now. So he has all these different options where he's going to have as a base. Windsor Castle, they're saying maybe will eventually go to Prince William. And there's Sandringham.
So what, Prince William as Prince of Wales could
go there eventually. But they've obviously
Castle.
just moved into their cottage or something. That maybe they just want to live a nice, slightly smaller, pared-down existence. But when you do read this article in Times, you are aware, like, how much money they have, how rich they are, how many castles they have.
Well, this actually irritates me slightly, Josh, because there have been a few people on social media critical of the royal family this week. Amazing, they didn't read the room. But look, it's free speech, good luck to them. And they've been pointing out that the Queen's worth was worth, the monarch, the King now, King Charles, half £1 billion, 500 million, no inheritance tax.
She's no Rishi Sunak.
She's no Rishi Sunak, exactly. But also, the family have assets in the billions. But the point is, there are assets. It's the royal family, it's the monarchy. Buckingham Palace, when they spend money on Buckingham Palace, it's not really for themselves, is it? It's a public building.
Do you think he'll let me move into Highgrove House?
Well, you could maybe have a granny flat.
I'll take it.
Take a box room.
I'll take it if I can use the garden.
But don't you think, Nick, this is a rather sort of petty attitude towards the wealth of the royal family? A lot of it is really our money.
Yeah, I do. And the Queen was known to be sort of quite cost-conscious, wasn't she? And pretty, I don't know what's the word, sort of frugal.
Parsimonious, frugal.
Yeah, and she, with her Tupperware and so on. And even Charles here, it said that he's going to consider opening more of these properties for public use to cover costs, and he's going to make an effort to slim down. But yeah, it is quite interesting.
But they're custodians of all these castles, aren't they?
Yeah, and it's interesting they don't want to live in them either.
Queen was criticised back in the day for having a gold piano. That was not really her piano.
Right.
She didn't sort of buy it on eBay.
Yeah, it was Elton John's piano.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it is interesting that Charles doesn't seem to like any of them. He doesn't like Buckingham Palace, though no one does. Prince Philip didn't want to live there really either. He doesn't like Windsor Castle. He likes Highgrove, but of course Camilla, the Queen consort, doesn't like Highgrove. So it's all a bit... And it is interesting, isn't it? It's the personal versus the duty. You suddenly have to move house. You don't really want to. It's going to, it's going to be uncomfortable. But
moving somewhere where there's too many bathrooms.
Yeah,
that's
right.
the problem.
Well, I think he should be in Buck House because I think that's the HQ, and I like the optics of it. And I think that it's great for tourism. Was when people go to Buckingham Palace, they know that he's in one of those rooms having a nap.
They're definitely going to keep it as a sort of office. The question is, how much time will they actually spend living there?
Yeah.
OK, all right. Well, look, we'll come back to some stories in relation to the very, very sad passing of Queen Elizabeth II shortly. But there are some other big headlines in tomorrow's papers, including the Ukraine. And this is in the Mail. Nick, tell me more.
OK, yeah, because this is an important story, of course. Russian troops are pushed back to the border in some regions, with Putin's men fleeing like Olympic sprinters as furious Vlad strikes power grid with missiles as revenge. So this has been obviously covered a lot on Twitter and everywhere, because it looks like Ukraine are actually, doing much better than anyone suspected militarily. And the key thing is the Kharkiv region, where a report by British intelligence says, in the face of Ukrainian advances, Russia has likely ordered the withdrawal of its troops from the entirety of the occupied Kharkiv region. So it's this counterattack that people are saying could be one of the greatest attacks in history, where they've pushed the Russians back more than anyone suspected. And that's the broad overview. And Russia's military has proved to be weaker than people thought. And this has been the big gamble for Putin, although he is able to hurt people with the gas supplies and so on.
But when people are defending their own land, they're going to fight harder than a bunch of people who don't want to be there. That's the reality of it. You know, the Russian military, they treat their soldiers terribly. There's all these reports of beatings, and they have to buy their own uniforms and corruption and all this stuff going on. Of course, they're not going to fight, and bad training.
And since the beginning, many Russian troops have abandoned their tanks.
Yeah, then that's what they're doing. It's, as well as Russian just not being up to the task, Russian soldiers not being up to the task, or the military, larger structure, the fact is Ukrainians have played an amazing hand. They have taken what resources they have with their bravery and taken what weapons have been provided to them, and also the training that the UK is partly responsible for, and they have outthought them. And this whole what's going on now was all a big double bluff. They were been talking about they were attacking that region, they were going down there, and then suddenly they went up here. They actually did kind of both a little bit, but they've taken back an area the size of Greater London. They're back up to the Russian border, up on the, you know, it pushes. Where they've taken is a massive hub in terms of that's going to affect the rest of the war. And really, they're talking about whether there's still obviously fighting that's going to be happening, but whether it's got to a point where Russia really can come back from that, unless they, of course, start conscription. Now, Putin doesn't want to do that because
Public
opinion. And the moment that kids in Moscow are forced into the army and people start seeing the reality of the war and that they're losing, and it isn't, they see beyond the propaganda, and also his strongman persona gets sort of popped, that's when he's in trouble. So it's now about really how he saves face.
Well, dare we call this a turning point?
Oh, of course, no, there's no question. And Zelensky is just smashing it still. Like, he just came out with a speech that he put online. And it's also the war is now being fought online as well as it is in these other material, physical spaces. But he wrote this really amazing speech, and he's just basically saying, like, you can't intimidate us. He's saying, because now, you know, because Russia's retaliated, they've attacked their power stations, so I think a third of the country doesn't have water. So basically, Zelensky's come and said, you know, if it's a choice between water and you, we choose, you know, we're having war or not, you know, not having you in our lives, we choose without you. If it's about not having gas or whatever, then we want life without you, food without you. He's like saying cold, hunger, darkness, thirst, for us, not as scary and deadly as your friendship and brotherhood. Like, he's called it. He's killing it.
He's called it. And Nick, the issue we've got, it's great news that Russia are in retreat, but it's a headache for the world in terms of what happens to Putin. He's cornered. How will he behave? Will there be a scorched earth policy? Will he press the nuclear button? Other human rights atrocities, war criminal already, allegedly. What might happen? I mean, this guy needs a gold-encrusted ladder to climb down, doesn't he?
Well, of course, none of us can say if he would push the nuclear button. I mean, that's just too big a question. You don't tend to think he would. But he is striking power grids. He's doing that kind of thing. He'll do everything. I mean, the Russians have every kind of war planned out, not just with Ukraine, but ultimately with America. If you look at their 50-year sort of war plan, they'll consider anything, whether assassinations, poisonings, of course, the economic approach we've seen, you know, gas supply and all that. So they'll try. He won't give up easily, will he? He'll try every nasty tactic he can, I think.
But do we need some smart diplomacy, Josh, where we do give this guy a ladder to climb down?
No, because he's shown us that he's shown us his true colours. That's a ridiculous thing to say. He's shown us his colours for decades. You know, we've known what he's like. But the point is, the bullying has stopped. And this is not the moment to suddenly go to give in to him. He has to be... This whole idea that he's still... We're not talking about deposing him. No one's talking about going into Russia.
Only President Biden, yeah.
Well, not really. Like, they're talking, you know, no one's saying really that that's what's going to happen now.
Yeah. OK, well, look, some rare good news in relation to the war in Ukraine. On to Tuesday's Times, and turning our attention now to Sweden, Josh.
Yeah, so in the Swedish elections, essentially what's happened is this far-right party that started essentially as neo-Nazis, although it's been somewhat transformed, has won 20% of the vote. Now, you add that to the 30% of the traditional, what would be their Conservative Party, suddenly for the first time in a long time, you have a coalition there that is now going to be running the country, they're saying. Of course, the final results aren't in, so it could shift a little bit, but that's what it seems to be heading. So the left are going to be out. And this is very much in response to, they would argue, what's been happening with immigration over the last years. There's been a lot of bombs. It's not really been reported very much in traditional media.
There's a surprise.
No, yeah. But they have had some real issues with criminal gangs.
And an issue with integration.
Basically.
Allegedly, across Sweden,
yes.
there are no-go zones for
And this
police.
is when these issues aren't discussed, when they're just sort of pretending that they almost don't happen, that's unfortunately what happens. It gives this, this is what happens. These neo-Nazi root party gets into power.
The extremists come to the fore.
Yeah, and because people aren't talking about it, because it isn't being...
And the public don't feel heard.
Exactly. And so they're going to give their vote to where they do feel heard.
And is there some evidence that the more centre-ground Conservatives would actually work with this far-right party?
I believe so, yeah.
Is a potential coalition on the cards?
That's what they're saying.
Because you kind of would imagine a UK Conservative Party wouldn't accept the support of a far-right organisation. But, Nick, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I can't comment on this particular party and how unsavoury they are because I don't know enough about it. I do know that, as we've said, immigration is a huge problem in Sweden. I heard that over 45% of the population of Malmo is immigrants. I don't know if that's correct. But and there's a big problem, actually, with anti-Semitism as well. So Sweden has a huge problem with that, and they have to address it. As it says here, analysts said Sweden was destined to become less open to immigration, impose tougher rules on minorities, and embrace nuclear power. And as as you said, if you don't tackle it, then more extreme parties will.
I mean,
rise
this
up.
has been an experiment from Sweden, hasn't it? And I've seen lots of articles in the last few days in which public figures in Sweden are saying, "Look, it's not working. The integration is not happening." And that was the idea of welcoming many millions of people from elsewhere into Sweden, that it would be this perfect melting pot.
Yes.
It hasn't happened.
It's the dream of multiculturalism. What's actually happened is parallel societies come up. And, of course, it's not just Sweden. We see this all across Europe. In many cases, it hasn't worked. But if you talk about it, you've been vilified for years. And we had 1.16 million come in this country in a year. And, of course, a certain number have remigrated as well. But we have this is a huge issue across Europe.
For sure. Nick, let's talk about the economy.
Yes, my expert topic, from Sweden's politics to the economy. All my expert topics tonight. Struggling UK economy clawed back ground with a 0.2% growth in July, but bank holiday for Queen's funeral, as I mentioned earlier, could knock 2 billion off GDP. So this rise was to do with retail, mainly consumer-facing services, but production and construction were the sectors that held back activity, so it didn't go as well as people were expecting. And inflation remains at a 40-year high. Of course, the pound's struggling pathetically against the dollar. So, yes, unfortunately, more economic bad news, and some of it will be affected by the Queen's funeral.
Although some economists think that this might be the peak, and that Liz Truss, her actions might have staved it off. So we'll see.
Yeah, there is a lot of thought that this support for people with their energy bills, capping them at £2,500 for 2 years, creates certainty. It should chop inflation in half to about 5% and prevent a deep recession.
That's the plan.
Here's
and I
hoping.
hope it happens, yeah.
Yeah, indeed so. On to...
Of course, by the way, we're going to get a massive bill. That money's coming from somewhere.
You know what? It's your kids. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, my grandkids.
On to Tuesday's Telegraph, and some tailors are struggling with stock, Nick.
Yes, so I found earlier today. Well, yeah, black ties sell out as gentlemen mourners rush to show their respect for Queen Elizabeth II. So this is a huge issue. Ties are selling out everywhere, black ties, obviously, to the point where the German street store who's the actual company? I think it's Turnbull. Is it Turnbull and Asset? Anyway, they'd sold out all their ties except for three £275 7-fold silk ties. So it's kind of like hand sanitizer in March 2020. You can now charge virtually anything.
Well, I got £275.
Yeah,
Best money I've ever spent.
Josh paid it. I was amazed. I couldn't believe I sold it to him for that much. But it's a great time to be selling ties. It is tough to get them. I managed to get one, but this is a big problem because, of course, we've got a supply and demand issue. No one suddenly predicted it. And they said to me, Nick, do you have a jacket? You might have to wear one that was Andrew Doyle's, and I have a policy. I will not touch anything that has been touched by Andrew Doyle.
Okay. I just wanted to say, Pete, anyone who's in Edinburgh, that the M&S website, there's one £15 black silk tie, but you have to go to the outskirts of the city, to the retail park. So get on it.
It's a high price to pay. Tuesday's Daily Mail, and we turn to some of the global tributes to Queen Elizabeth II. Josh.
So, yes, anybody who's done gigs in... have you done those gigs in Dubai?
Yes.
Yeah. So did you go up the Burj
Khalifa.
Burj Khalifa? Did you ever
No,
do
I
it?
didn't go up that.
You got to pay like 30 quid. You go up. It's very annoying because you go in these lifts. You've got to go in 2 or 3 lifts, and then you're only halfway.
Right.
So you're thinking like, come on, man, I've just paid all this money. I would like to go to the top here. It is pretty impressive still. And they've done a 2,700-foot tribute to the Queen, which is I've seen a picture of. It's very nice. Lots of countries across the world. Empire State Building's done it. In Israel, they had the British flag on one of the buildings. So it's all these countries showing respect for her. And that's a lovely thing.
Well, yeah, Thomas Markle's son was on Dan Wootton's show earlier, and he described the Queen as the world's queen. I don't think that's overstating it.
She's the most famous queen,
They
obviously,
felt
yeah.
that she belonged to everyone, that she was this global figure.
Yeah,
Of course she was, yeah.
And Macron even said that we called her the Queen, and everyone knew who he meant. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Although, so this is it's great, but I will say,
Have you ever said anything nice about Macron before?
that's the first thing I think.
Can we clip that?
Well, has he ever said anything nice about us before? So, but yeah, it's strange times. Yeah, I actually went to Dubai as well, but didn't bother going up the Burj Khalifa because the hotels are so nice. Why would you go in? Although that's controversial.
To be
People
honest,
say they're built on
I've
slave labor.
done those gigs so many times. I was so bored.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm finally going to do it. But also Legoland, they've had a little trip. They have their little cities built. So they've done. They've had the people like mourning and giving flowers at the gates of Windsor Castle and the Buckingham Palace displays. So it's a nice little touch like that. And the notice of Queen Elizabeth's death was put on Buckingham Palace. Many things.
And also, it's nice to see an image of the Queen plastered on billboards around the country, which will come at a cost to advertisers, but a great gesture.
The billboard's nice, but then it's also gotten a bit random. If I'm on, there's like I've seen a few things online of just people just sending out newsletters, just
Right.
like, this is our tribute with a picture of the Queen. Here's our tribute to the Queen. And by the way, you get 10% off shaving products.
I know what you
whatever.
mean. Yeah.
It's getting a little bit like the virtue signal element to
Yes.
it. Like, how can we? Let's use this as an excuse to send out a
Companies
mailing
pretending
list.
to be nice again.
They're very good at it, aren't they?
Yeah, Ben & Jerry's been in touch at all. I wonder if they've got any thoughts about the Queen.
Let's hope not.
No, let's hope not indeed. How about Tuesday's Times? And the Queen Consort shares the same passion our late Queen had, Josh.
Yeah, so they call her here, she's the Queen Consort, but the Times is saying Queen Camilla. So I don't know if they're going to be dropping the consort how
I think
soon.
that will go. They are technically King and Queen.
I guess so. So they're sort of, it's weird. You sort of feel like, it was nice that the Queen did that. It was a sort of a sign that Camilla has really been working hard these last couple of decades and whatever. And and also it was obviously a sign of respect from the Queen to Camilla and obviously caring for her son, loving her son.
Yeah.
But at the same time you think, let's stick with the consort. Now let's just give it a little bit longer, but whatever. But yes,
Probation period.
Queen Consort Camilla is really into her horses. Obviously, the Queen was, so it seems like yes, Camilla's going to be taking them over. And there's a lot of, she's really into the racing and all those elements of it. Prince Charles supposedly isn't as into it all. Mm-hmm. So it makes sense to take that stuff over. Although I believe that the horses that are going to be running this week are still running under the Queen's traditional colours rather than the King.
Fair enough. Well, let's stay on animals, Josh. Our final story from Tuesday's Telegraph and the true love of the Queen. We know what they are.
Corgis. That's what people were wondering about. What's going to happen to the Corgis? They're going to the Duke and Duchess of York.
Okay.
Or a couple of them are. Supposedly, what happened with Prince Philip, when he died, they bought some dogs for her to cheer her up. She didn't actually... She was always about breeding dogs. She had a dog when she was 18 that was given to her, and she kept on basically breeding the dogs from that dog. And she didn't want them to be around after she'd gone, I think. So,
right.
But then they bought these new dogs for her, and she made her super duper happy, which is lovely. So they're going to Duke and Duchess of York, which is, I guess, nice.
Two things I loved about the dogs. One was that the Queen used to write letters as the dogs that were apparently absolutely hilarious. And the other thing is that I didn't know that some of them were Dorgies, which is a cross between a Corgi and a Dachshund.
Well, there you go. Nice to end on a fun fact. We'll be back tomorrow with more respectful reflection on the passing of Queen Elizabeth II. See you tomorrow at 11.
King Charles addressing first the joint Houses of Parliament, and in a few minutes' time he'll be standing vigil by his mother's coffin in St Giles in Edinburgh. We'll explain everything that has gone on today, but before all of that, let's get the news with Tamsin Roberts.
Nigel, thank you. Good evening from the GB newsroom. The Queen's coffin is now at rest at St Giles Cathedral, where members of the public are filing past to pay their respects. Thousands of people are queuing to go inside the cathedral in Edinburgh to view Her Majesty's coffin. Her Majesty will lie in rest there for the next 24 hours. King Charles will stand vigil next to his mother's coffin this evening. The King has visited the Scottish Parliament, where he and other members of the royal family received a motion of condolence from MSPs. After 2 minutes' silence, First Minister Nicola Sturgeon spoke about her first meeting with the Queen when she was a child. She reflected on the Queen's life and her close bond with Scotland. Earlier, the King and other royal family members led a procession following his mother's coffin to St Giles Cathedral in Edinburgh. It was taken from Holyrood House along the Royal Mile to St Giles Cathedral, where a remembrance service was held. During the service, Elder of the Church of Scotland, Morag Milne, thanked God for the Queen's long life.
With all our hearts, we thank you for the long life, the shining example, the steadfast commitment to duty, the strong faith, and the good humour of our wise and great Queen.
Earlier this morning in London, the King attended Westminster Hall, where both Houses of Parliament expressed their condolences.
Your Majesty, I welcome you and Her Majesty the Queen Consort to Parliament today on this solemn occasion.
In reply, the King said he was deeply grateful for their addresses and described Parliament as a living and breathing instrument of democracy. Paying tribute to the late Queen, he vowed to follow in her footsteps.
While very young, Her late Majesty pledged herself to serve her country and her people, and to maintain the precious principles of constitutional government which lie at the heart of our nation. This vow she kept with unsurpassed devotion. She set an example of selfless duty, which, with God's help and your counsels, I am resolved faithfully to follow.
King Charles III. This is GB News. Back now to Nigel.
Well, there is one full week of mourning to go. I have to tell you, the crowds in London are huge around Buckingham Palace, and people already beginning to queue to get into Westminster Hall to pay their respects to the Queen. Unbelievable. 48 hours before it even begins, there are people camping out on pavements in London. Goodness only knows how the Metropolitan Police and others are going to control the vast, vast numbers that intend to come. But of course, it's been Scotland's Day today, as it was yesterday, very much. And in St Giles Cathedral, the Queen's coffin is there now. Members of the Scottish public are beginning to file past and pay their respects. And at 7:20 or thereabouts, all four of the Queen's children will stand vigil, and they will stand silent around the coffin for a period of about 20 minutes, and we'll cut to that as and when it happens. But what a dramatic day it's been for King Charles. It's very odd, isn't it? On the one hand, it's a very sombre period of mourning. Millions of people still very, very upset. And it's a strange thing. The Queen was 96, and yet I think many of us just thought she was immortal. Well, it wasn't to be. Yet at the same time, Charles has to get out there. And there he was this morning. He was in Westminster Hall addressing both Houses of Parliament. And this afternoon, he's been in Edinburgh processing down the street. I'm joined by GB News' political editor, Darren McCaffrey, who is at Holyrood right now. Darren, just talk us through, please, for our viewers and listeners, King Charles's activities today.
Yeah, quite an extraordinary day, quite a momentous, historic day, undoubtedly, Nigel. It began this morning in London, in which the King addressed both Houses of Parliament, the House of Commons and the House of Lords, after we heard speeches from the Lord Speaker and the House of Commons Speaker, Lindsay Hoyle. You know, we don't see that very often, do we? And it normally doesn't actually happen in public or even this soon after the death of a previous monarch. But clearly, the King, I keep referring to Prince Charles, King Charles felt it was necessary, kind of part of the constitutional arrangement. He is a constitutional monarch after all, and is there, it must be said, of course, with the consent, only with the consent of Parliament. He then travelled up to Scotland, and the images today, in many ways, have been incredible, frankly. I'm here on the Royal Mile. You were talking there, weren't you, about what the Metropolitan Police are expecting in London. I was reading in the Times this morning where there are concerns that London could become full. Well, at times today, Nigel, Edinburgh has felt like it has been full. The roads have been blocked. This Royal Mile has seen 5, 10, 15 people deep to see that kind of solemn, but also quite joyous moment in some ways of the hearse making its way up this Royal Mile, this medieval street with its cobbled pavements. And there was just silence for large parts of it. Thousands, tens of thousands of people gathered here, and you could hear a pin drop. Yes, at certain points there were rounds of applause. People have got different ways of expressing their emotion, but largely it was a solemn silence. And yet this was a celebration in St Giles Cathedral later on of Queen Elizabeth's life. And we heard from the First Minister of Scotland, Gordon Brown was here, Liz Truss, the new Prime Minister, was here. It's incredible how our politicians have come together at this period. And subsequently, since then, we've heard from, again, His Majesty the King in the Scottish Parliament, listening to and taking the motion of condolence from MSPs. And as you say, in the next couple of minutes, we're expecting him to arrive here at St Giles Cathedral, in which he, along with his two brothers and a sister, will stay in vigil next to his mother's coffin inside that church for around 20 minutes. This is actually a relatively recent tradition that began back when George V died and his four sons stood vigil. We're expecting this to happen, as I say, in the next 20 minutes or so, and it will be the first time we think that a woman has done it. Princess Anne is likely to join her three brothers. It will be another emotional moment, I suspect, not just for the royal family, but for those thousands of people that are queuing up to pay their respects here in Edinburgh before the Queen's body moves on to London late afternoon tomorrow.
Thank you very much indeed, Darren. And again, you see Darren expressing there from Edinburgh much the same thing that I've seen in London over the last few days. Huge crowds of people, and yet almost total silence. It really is quite remarkable. Now, as Darren said, the King did address the Scottish Parliament, and joining me is Jamie Green, Conservative MSP, who's an MSP for the West Scotland region. Jamie, good evening. And can I ask you, how did King Charles go down in the Scottish Parliament?
Well, I mean, as one would have expected, he was very gratefully received and very warmly welcomed to the Scottish Parliament. It's not the first time he's appeared in the Scottish Parliament, but it's certainly the first time he appeared as His Majesty the King. And it was quite a special experience. I think your correspondent summed it up perfectly. One of solemn duty, but also of joy and celebration. And I think that really sums up everything you've seen about what's been happening in Edinburgh over the last few days. It's really a celebration of Her Majesty's life, but also doing it in a way that I think only us Scots know how to, and that's with dutiful respect. And I think you can see that from what I can hear